14 rounds left. That was what Captain Cole Masterson counted as he pressed his back against the sun-baked rock and watched his world collapse into a killing box. The Arizona desert stretched out before him in shades of copper and shadow, beautiful in the way only lethal places can be. And somewhere in that vastness, his team was bleeding out while the mortars walked closer with each thunderous blast. The first round had hit at 0412 hours. Masterson knew this because he'd been checking his watch when the sky split open and turned a cluster of Palo Verde trees into matchsticks and fire. The explosion had sent Specialist Danny Garcia, 24 years old and 11 months into Border Patrol service, tumbling into a ravine with his left shoulder torn open by shrapnel that gleamed wet and dark in the pre-dawn light. The second round landed 30 meters closer. The third landed close enough that Masterson tasted copper and dust and the particular flavor of fear that comes when you realize someone out there knows exactly what they're doing. This wasn't random fire, this was execution mathematics. Masterson led a 5-person team, call sign Reaper 6, operating out of the Tucson sector in what the official reports called routine patrol operations and what everyone who actually worked the line called controlled chaos with clipboards. They'd been moving through Skeleton Canyon on a rescue operation. 40-plus migrants abandoned by coyotes in the freezing desert night when the world decided to teach them the difference between mission parameters and reality. Now those migrants were scattered, some dead, most wounded, and Masterson's team was trapped in a shallow depression that the tactical briefing had called defensible terrain and that any soldier with 2 minutes of combat experience would recognize as a grave with inconvenient timing. Sergeant Elena Vance appeared at his elbow, like smoke given form. Her face was streaked with someone else's blood, and her hands were shaking in the way that happened when adrenaline met professional competence and the body couldn't decide which one to trust. She'd been Border Patrol for 8 years, Army before that, and Masterson had seen her stitch wounds under fire that would have made civilian trauma surgeons weep. Right now, she looked like she was calculating odds and coming up with numbers no one wanted to hear. "Contact north," she said. Her voice cut through the chaos with the kind of calm that came from 7 years of doing this dance and knowing all the steps ended the same way. "Multiple hostiles? I'm counting 12 to 15 based on muzzle flash. Professional spacing, coordinated fire. They're not rushing us." "Because they don't have to," Masterson said. He keyed his radio and tried to keep his voice level, even though his heart was trying to punch through his ribs. "Reaper 6 to Overwatch. We are under heavy contact. Grid coordinates November Whiskey 4723. Request immediate fire support and medical extraction. 6 souls, 3 critical, ammunition status critical." Static answered him. Then a voice so distorted by interference he could barely make it out. "Reaper 6, Overwatch copies, heavy jamming on all frequencies, no available assets in range. Recommend you dig in and wait for relief." The transmission died. Masterson didn't bother trying again. He'd spent 14 years with Border Patrol, and he knew what no available assets meant when translated from bureaucracy into English. It meant they were on their own. It meant that whatever came next would be written up as tragedy if they were lucky and negligence if the investigators felt ambitious. It meant his daughters Emma and Sophie, 12 and 9 years old and living with their mother in Phoenix, might wake up tomorrow without a father because someone in a clean office had decided patrol routes based on Excel spreadsheets instead of terrain analysis. Boss, that was Specialist Rachel Hayes, 33 years old and the best communications operator Masterson had worked with in his entire career. She was crouched behind a boulder that wouldn't stop anything bigger than a handgun round, her face pale in the growing light, her equipment scattered around her like the remains of a last stand. "Boss, I'm picking up encrypted chatter on cartel frequencies. They're coordinating. They knew we'd be here." Masterson felt something cold settle into his stomach. Knew we'd be here. Past tense. Planned. That meant intelligence leak, which meant someone in the chain had sold them out, which meant this wasn't an ambush so much as an appointment they'd walked into right on time. He looked at his team and did the math that commanders do when there's no good answer, and the only choice is which kind of bad to accept. Agent Marcus Webb, 29 years old and their designated marksman, was down with a compound leg fracture from when their vehicle had rolled during the initial contact. He was conscious, lucid, and completely immobile unless someone carried him. Analyst Amy Park, 26 and on her first field deployment, had taken blast concussion hard enough that she kept asking where she was and why the sun was so bright. Garcia had his shoulder torn up, but could still function if someone gave him enough morphine and a good reason. Vance was holding together through sheer force of will and muscle memory, but Masterson could see the cracks starting to show. Hayes was combat ineffective in terms of weapons, but her brain was still working, and right now that brain was their only edge. That left Masterson with 14 rounds in his rifle, 2 magazines for his sidearm, and the growing certainty that none of it would matter. Another mortar round hit, close enough that he felt the pressure wave in his teeth. Rocks and frozen earth rained down on them. When the smoke cleared, he could see shapes moving through the pre-dawn gloom, professional soldiers doing professional work, advancing with the kind of patience that came from knowing your enemy had nowhere to run and all the time in the world to die. "Boss," Garcia said. The kid was cradling his ruined shoulder, his rifle propped awkwardly against a rock, his face the color of old snow. "Boss, what's the play?" Masterson looked at the emergency beacon clipped to his vest. It was a small gray cylinder, barely bigger than a road flare, with a single red button under a protective cap that he'd carried for 14 years and never once touched. The beacon was for worst-case scenarios only, situations where everything had gone so catastrophically wrong that broadcasting your exact position to every listening station within 50 miles was worth the risk, because the alternative was death without witnesses. This qualified. He flipped the protective cap and pressed the button. The beacon didn't make a sound. It just started pulsing, a steady red glow that seemed absurdly bright against the darkness. And somewhere in the electromagnetic spectrum, it was screaming for help on every frequency. Satellite uplinks and emergency channels. Anything with a receiver would hear it. So would the enemy. Vance stared at him. "What are you doing?" "Calling in a miracle," Masterson said. "That thing broadcasts on every channel. It'll give away our exact position to every hostile force within 50 kilometers. "They already know where we are," Masterson said. "Look around, Elena. We're past stealth. We're past tactical options. We're at the part where we hope someone friendly hears us before someone unfriendly decides to finish the job." "Contact east," Hayes shouted. She fired 3 rounds, and somewhere in the growing light, someone screamed. Then 2 more shapes appeared to replace the one that fell, and the advancing line kept coming like a tide that couldn't be stopped by will or bullets or desperate last stands. The machine gun that had been hammering their position from the northwest ridge went silent. Not suppressed, silent. 3 full seconds of nothing but wind and the ringing in Masterson's ears and the sound of his own heartbeat counting down the moments until the end. Then hostile voices, distant but sharp with panic. Spanish, fast and frightened. Hayes didn't speak fluent Spanish, but she'd worked the border long enough to know the important words. "Sniper," she said. "Boss, they're saying sniper." Masterson froze. "Sniper? Who's sniper?" A second shot cracked across the canyon. Different angle, maybe 300 meters to the north of wherever the first one had originated. Another hostile voice cut off mid-shout and the advancing line faltered. Confusion spreading through professional soldiers who suddenly didn't know which threat to prioritize. "That's not Border Patrol," Webb said from where he lay, with his shattered legs stretched out on the rocks. "That's not CBP Tactical. That's not anyone we called." "Then who the hell is it?" Garcia asked. His voice cracked on the last word, youth and fear mixing in a way that made Masterson's chest tighten, because 24 was too young to die in a desert grave, because someone in an office had drawn lines on a map without checking if those lines ran through cartel territory. "I don't know," Masterson said. "But they just bought us time. Vance, status on our wounded. 3 critical, 2 serious, 1 minor," Vance said. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, even though Masterson could see them shaking. "Webb needs surgery for that leg. Park needs a CT scan for the concussion. Garcia needs antibiotics and probably orthopedic consult. The migrants, we lost 3, 12 wounded. Boss, we need a medevac and we needed it 10 minutes ago." "Working on it," Masterson said, even though he had no idea how to make that happen when their comms were jammed and their position was surrounded, and the only thing standing between them and a very public execution was an unknown shooter who might be friendly or might just be settling a different score. A third shot rang out, then a fourth. The hostile advance stopped completely, and somewhere in the darkness, men were shouting orders that nobody wanted to follow. Masterson risked a look over the boulder and counted movement through his optics. 8 confirmed hostiles down or wounded, 6 retreating toward the canyon mouth, 4 holding position but clearly shaken. 18 hostiles reduced to 4 effective fighters in less than 3 minutes. By one shooter, maybe two, but the shot timing and professional spacing suggested solo operator, which meant someone out there with skills that went beyond military standard and into the realm of things that people with clearances didn't talk about in rooms that weren't swept for bugs. Hayes was monitoring the cartel radio chatter, her face pale but focused. "Boss, you need to hear this. They're calling for someone. They're..." She paused, translating in real time. "They're saying the ghost is here. La fantasma del desierto. The desert ghost. Boss, they sound terrified." "The desert ghost," Webb repeated from his position on the ground. "I've heard that name. Old-timers, guys with 20-plus years on the line, they tell stories. Someone who's been operating out here since, hell, since the early 2000s maybe, takes down cartel operations, vanishes before anyone can get a look, never leaves evidence, never gets caught." "Those are campfire stories," Garcia said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. "Campfire stories don't kill 18 cartel soldiers in 3 minutes, Masterson said. He keyed his radio and tried a broadcast on open channel, knowing it was probably stupid, but having exactly 0 better options. "Unknown shooter, unknown shooter. This is Reaper 6. If you can hear this, we are 6 souls critically wounded, holding position at grid November Whiskey 4723. We are combat ineffective and require immediate extraction. Please acknowledge." Static. Wind, the distant sound of rotor blades that might have been real or might have been wishful thinking given audio form. Then a voice on the radio, gender neutral, calm, with an accent that placed it somewhere in the American Southwest. "Your beacon brought me. Are your people stable enough for transport?" Masterson felt his breath catch. "Who is this?" "Someone who was in the area," the voice said. "Your medic, is she competent?" Vance, who'd been listening on the same channel, keyed her mic. "This is Sergeant Elena Vance, combat medic, 8 years experience. I have 3 critical patients who need advanced trauma care within the next 20 minutes, or I'm going to lose them." "Who am I talking to?" "Doesn't matter," the voice said. "I'm coming to your position. Tell your people to hold fire. I'm not your enemy." The figure appeared on the ridgeline 5 minutes later, moving with a kind of tactical grace that suggested special operations background or something even more specialized. Masterson couldn't make out features, couldn't determine gender from this distance, could only see tactical clothing in desert colors, a long rifle with what looked like a suppressor that extended the barrel to something approaching absurd length, and movement patterns that spoke of someone who'd done this so many times that thinking wasn't required anymore. The figure descended the ridge and crossed 50 meters of open ground without hesitation, without haste, without anything that suggested concern about the remaining cartel soldiers who might still have working weapons and functional hatred. When the figure got within speaking distance, Masterson could see tactical gloves, a face covering that revealed only eyes, and equipment that looked military-grade but carried no insignia, no unit patches, no identification of any kind. "Lower your weapon, Captain," the voice said. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." Masterson realized he'd raised his rifle without thinking. He lowered it slowly, watching the figure's hands, watching for any sign of threat or deception or the 1,000 small tells that marked hostile intent. He saw none of those things. What he saw was someone who moved like water, who carried gear that cost more than Masterson's annual salary, and who radiated the kind of calm competence that came from doing impossible things until they became routine. The figure tossed a pack at Vance's feet. "Military-grade trauma kit," the voice said. "Quick clot, tourniquets, chest seals, IV setup. Should be enough to keep your people alive until the cavalry arrives." Vance caught the pack and stared at the contents like someone had just handed her a miracle in canvas and velvet. "This is," she said, then stopped because what do you say when someone gives you exactly what you need at exactly the moment you need it? "This is JSOC level equipment, special operations." "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it moved to Webb's position and knelt, examining the leg without touching. Professional assessment that took maybe 10 seconds. "Femoral artery intact," the voice said. "Tibial fracture, non-compound. Immobilize it properly and he'll walk again." "You a medic?" Webb asked. His voice was tight with pain but steady with the kind of calm that came from realizing you might actually survive. I've seen enough injuries to know which ones matter, the voice said. Moved to park next, checked her pupils with a pen light that appeared from somewhere in the tactical vest. Concussion. Moderate. She needs imaging, but she'll survive. To Garcia, clean the wound, antibiotics, 6 weeks and you're back on duty. Vance was staring now, professional recognition meeting something close to awe. You've done this before, she said. Not asked, stated. More times than I'd like to remember, the voice said. In the distance, the sound of rotor blades resolved from possibility into certainty. 2 helicopters, running lights visible now against the growing dawn. Border Patrol, tactical unit markings clear even at this range. The figure stood and started backing toward the shadows. Wait, Masterson said. He didn't shout, didn't demand, just spoke with the kind of quiet urgency that came from knowing this might be his only chance. I need a name for the report. You just saved 6 lives. That deserves recognition. The figure paused. No, you don't. At minimum, I need a call sign, Masterson said. Something I can put in the after-action report. Something that explains how we survived when we shouldn't have. Ghost, the voice said. If you need something, call me Ghost. Ghost what? Hayes asked. She'd moved closer, her analyst brain probably already composing questions that would never get answered. Just Ghost, the voice said. The cartels called you something, Masterson said. La Fantasma del Desierto. Slight pause, barely noticeable, but Masterson caught it. They exaggerate, the voice said. 6 confirmed kills, 3 weapons destroyed, a drone hit mid-flight, Masterson said. That's not exaggeration. That's Tuesday, the voice said. And Masterson heard something in that response that might have been dark humor or might have been the kind of truth that comes from doing terrible things for so long they stopped feeling terrible. The helicopters were close now, dust and rotor wash starting to paint the air golden brown. Ghost started backing away again. How long have you been operating out here, Masterson asked. Not demanded. Asked, please. Long enough to know that convoy wasn't random, Ghost said. Cartels knew your route, your timing, your response protocols. Someone fed them intelligence. Someone wanted you dead and wanted it to look like an operational failure. Watch your back, Captain. That's, Masterson started, but Ghost was already gone. By the time he reached the spot where the figure had been standing, there was nothing. No footprints in the rocky soil, no thermal signature when he checked his optics, no sign that anyone had been there at all except for the trauma pack that Vance was using to keep Webb and Garcia in park alive. Boss, Garcia called out. His voice sounded young again, younger than 24, young enough that Masterson remembered his own daughters and felt his chest tighten. Boss, did that just happen? Masterson stared at the empty desert. I don't know what just happened, he said. The helicopters landed in a storm of dust and noise and professional urgency. Medics poured out before the wheels touched ground, trauma teams who took one look at the casualties and started calling for blood and equipment and all the things that civilization provides to people who survive long enough to ask for help. Masterson watched his team get loaded onto stretchers, watched the trauma packs get handed over to professionals who recognized JSOC equipment when they saw it, watched the whole scene play out like something from a film where the heroes survive and the bad guys run and someone somewhere is keeping score. 3 days later, Masterson sat in an office at Border Patrol headquarters in Tucson, across a desk from Deputy Chief Marcus Webb, who shared a name with his injured specialist but no relation, and a man in a suit who'd been introduced only as federal liaison and who carried himself with the kind of authority that came from agencies that didn't advertise and budgets that didn't get audited. Your report omits certain details, Webb said. He was 52, 26 years with Border Patrol, and he had the kind of eyes that suggested he'd seen every lie and memorized the tells. Sir, Masterson said, and left it at that. The individual who provided tactical support, the suit guy said. His voice was flat, professional. The kind of voice that asked questions it already knew the answers to, just to see if you'd lie. You listed them as unknown affiliate. We need more. Masterson described what he'd seen. The gear, the skill level, the name Ghost, the cartel fear, the way the figure moved like smoke and vanished like morning mist when the sun burned through. He watched Webb and the suit guy exchange looks that spoke volumes without saying words. You know who this is, Masterson said. That's classified, Webb said. Sir, with respect, this person saved my team, Masterson said. I deserve to know who I'm thanking. What you deserve the suit guy said, and his voice carried the kind of weight that comes from making decisions other people die from, is to go home to your daughters and not ask questions that could get people killed. Some assets operate beyond official channels. They do work that needs doing, but can't be acknowledged. You were lucky. Leave it at that. And if I don't, Masterson asked. Long pause. Then Webb leaned forward. Then you risk burning someone who's been protecting this border for longer than you've been alive. Is that what you want? How long? Masterson asked. His voice came out rougher than he intended. How long has Ghost been operating? This conversation is over, Captain, the suit guy said and stood. Your team performed admirably under impossible circumstances. The official record will reflect that. Everything else is classified and will remain classified. Are we clear? Crystal, Masterson said, even though nothing about this was clear, except the certainty that he'd stumbled into something that had layers he couldn't see and implications he wasn't cleared to understand. After they left, Masterson sat alone in the empty office. He opened his laptop and logged into the Border Patrol incident database, the one that tracked significant events and filed reports that someone somewhere probably read when they got bored with actual work. He searched for patterns: border incidents, unknown operator, cartel casualties, mysterious interventions. The database returned 47 hits spanning 16 years, 47 separate incidents where cartel operations got disrupted, soldiers died, and survivors reported a ghost shooter who appeared from nowhere and vanished before anyone got a clear look. 47 times someone had stepped into the gap between law and chaos and made a choice that saved lives. 47 times the official reports listed unknown affiliate or unidentified party or simply declined to comment on tactical details. 16 years, 47 operations. One person, maybe a whole unit of people who carried the same legend. But Masterson didn't think it was a unit. Units had logistics, they had chain of command, they had bureaucracy and oversight and all the things that made large organizations function and also made them slow. What he'd seen in that canyon was something that moved like water and killed like lightning and vanished like it had never existed at all. 16 years of fighting alone. 16 years of walking into places where civilization ended and making sure civilization had a chance to continue. 16 years of being a ghost because ghosts could do things that people with names and ranks and official sanction couldn't do without filling out paperwork and asking permission and waiting for committees to decide if saving lives was worth the risk. Masterson's screen went dark. In the black mirror of the monitor, he saw his own reflection staring back. And somewhere beyond that reflection, somewhere in the vast Arizona desert that stretched from here to Mexico and beyond, someone was still out there, still watching, still fighting, still choosing to be the wall between chaos and the people who deserved better than what chaos offered. He thought about his daughters, about Emma asking when Daddy would be home, and Sophie asking if the bad guys were real or just pretend. He thought about Garcia with his shoulder torn up, about Webb with his legs shattered, about Park with her concussion, and Vance with her hands shaking, and Hayes with her equipment scattered like wreckage from a disaster that almost happened. He thought about how close they'd come to being names on a memorial wall somewhere, how close they'd come to being classified losses and lessons learned for the next team that walked into an ambush with good intentions and bad intelligence. And he thought about Ghost, about 16 years of doing this, about choosing to fight a war that had no end date and no victory conditions and no promise of anything, except more desert and more bodies and more nights where you stared at the darkness and wondered if this was the time luck ran out. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a moment, Masterson considered not answering, considered going home and holding his daughters and pretending the last 72 hours hadn't happened. But he'd spent 14 years in Border Patrol, and he knew that pretending never worked for long. He answered. Captain Cole Masterson, a voice said. Same voice from the radio, same calm, same absolute certainty. Masterson's hand tightened on the phone. Who is this? Vicente Garza, the voice said. Lieutenant to Mateo Valdez. Valdez runs trafficking from Sonora through Devil's Canyon and Skeleton. Your team stumbled into his territory. He doesn't like witnesses. Next time he won't show mercy. Watch your back. Next time, Masterson said, but the line was already dead. He sat there in the empty office with the phone pressed to his ear and silence pressing back. Vicente Garza, Mateo Valdez. Names he recognized from intelligence briefings and cartel org charts, and the long list of people who did terrible things and somehow never faced consequences because they had money and connections and the kind of protection that came from knowing who to pay and when to pay them. Your team stumbled into his territory. Past tense. Stumbled. Like it was an accident. Like walking patrol routes that had been filed and approved and cleared through 6 levels of bureaucracy was somehow trespassing on land that cartels had claimed through violence and fear. Next time he won't show mercy. Future tense. Threat. Promise. Statement of fact delivered with the confidence of someone who'd seen how these situations played out and knew the ending before the story started. Watch your back. Advice. Warning, the kind of thing you said when you wanted someone to know you were coming, but you wanted them to sweat first. Wanted them to spend nights jumping at shadows and days looking over their shoulders and weeks wondering if this was the moment everything fell apart. Masterson deleted the call from his phone history. Then he opened a new file on his laptop and started typing. Not an official report, not something that would go into the system and get reviewed by people who'd classify it and file it and forget it. Just notes, details, everything he could remember about Ghost. The gear, the movement patterns, the skill level, the 16-year pattern of interventions, the name Mateo Valdez, the threat from Vicente Garza. The certainty that whatever he'd stumbled into was bigger than a single ambush and deeper than a single cartel operation and more dangerous than anything the official briefings had ever mentioned. He typed until his eyes burned and his fingers ached and the sun came up through the office windows to paint everything gold and normal and safe in the way that daylight makes people believe the darkness isn't real. Then he saved the file, encrypted it, backed it up 3 times and went home to his daughters because sometimes the only thing you can do is hold the people you love and promise them the bad guys are just pretend, even when you know that's the biggest lie anyone ever tells. 6 months after Skeleton Canyon, Cole Masterson woke up at 3 in the morning with his heart hammering and the taste of copper in his mouth. The dreams had been getting worse, not better. Worse. Every night he was back in that shallow depression, watching mortars walk closer, counting rounds he didn't have, making peace with the fact that his daughters would grow up without a father because someone in an office had drawn lines on a map without checking if those lines ran through hell. Except in the dreams, Ghost never showed up. In the dreams, Masterson watched his team die one by one, and all he could do was count the bodies and wonder which one he'd be. He got out of bed and walked to the kitchen of his apartment in Phoenix. Small place, 1 bedroom, the kind of space a divorced father rents when he's got his kids every other weekend and doesn't need much else. Emma and Sophie were with their mother this week. The silence pressed down like weight. His phone sat on the counter where he'd left it, next to the encrypted file he'd been building for 24 weeks. Details about Ghost, about the 47 incidents, about Mateo Valdez and Vicente Garza, and the growing certainty that whatever he'd stumbled into was bigger than a single ambush and older than his entire career. The phone buzzed. Text message from Elena Vance. Coffee tomorrow? The usual place? Masterson typed back, 0900, bring the others. The usual place was a diner in Tucson, halfway between the hospital where Marcus Webb was doing physical therapy and the office where Amy Park had been reassigned to desk duty after the doctors cleared her for work, but not for field operations. They'd been meeting once a month since the canyon, unofficial gatherings that started as check-ins and evolved into something closer to therapy sessions where nobody used the word therapy because that would make it real. Masterson arrived first. The diner was the kind of place that served breakfast all day and didn't ask questions when people sat in corners and spoke in voices that didn't carry. He ordered coffee and waited. Vance showed up at 08:55, precise as always, her face still carrying the shadows that came from spending 8 hours keeping people alive while the world exploded around you. 31 years old and looking both younger and older, depending on how the light hit. She slid into the booth and didn't waste time on small talk. Still thinking about it, she said. Every night, Masterson admitted. Danny Garcia arrived next, his left shoulder still stiff from where the shrapnel had torn through muscle and tendon. 24 years old and walking like he'd aged a decade in 6 months. Rachel Hayes came with him, her analyst brain probably already cataloging details and building patterns from fragments. Webb hobbled in on a cane that he hated with the kind of passion usually reserved for betrayals and losses. Park arrived last, quiet in the way that people get when their brain has been rattled hard enough that trust becomes negotiable. They ordered food nobody wanted and coffee everyone needed. And for 5 minutes, they sat in silence because sometimes that was all you could do when words felt inadequate for the weight of what you'd survived. Garcia broke first. Anyone else still thinking about Ghost? Every single day, Hayes said, I've been asking around. Old-timers, guys with 20-plus years on the border, they've all heard rumors. Desert Phantom, mystery operator, someone who's been out there since the early 2000s taking down cartel operations. I ran electronic traces, Hayes said. She pulled out a tablet and set it on the table, screen showing frequency analysis and signal patterns. Encrypted communications near incident sites over the past 16 years. Always the same signature. Military-grade frequency hopping, the kind of equipment that costs more than our annual budget. Someone with serious resources. Webb leaned forward, despite the pain it clearly caused. I analyzed the shots based on what I saw. 800 to 1,000 meter engagements. Moving targets, low light conditions, precision that would make most military snipers look like amateurs. That's not regular special operations. That's something else entirely. Masterson pulled out his own tablet and opened the file he'd been building. 47 incidents over 16 years, he said, all along the Arizona-Mexico border. Pattern is consistent. Cartel operations disrupted, soldiers killed, civilians saved. Zero collateral damage. Always the same method. Precision fire, rapid relocation, complete disappearance before anyone can respond. Cartels have a $2 million bounty on whoever's doing this. Park spoke for the first time, her voice softer than it used to be. 2 million. That's not just retribution. That's desperation. Whoever Ghost is, they've done serious damage to cartel infrastructure. Over 200 confirmed kills, Masterson said. Maybe more if we count the operations that didn't make it into official reports. Someone has been conducting a private war against Mateo Valdez for longer than most of us have been on the border. The question is why, Vance said. People don't fight alone for 16 years without a reason, without a purpose that goes deeper than duty or patriotism or whatever we tell ourselves when we put on the uniform. Masterson thought about the phone call from Vicente Garza. The threat, the certainty in that voice. Your team stumbled into his territory, like the border was his, like American soil somehow belonged to cartels because they'd claimed it through violence, and nobody had the will or the resources to take it back. I got a tip, Masterson said, off the record, from Deputy Chief Webb. The other Webb, Garcia clarified, because having two Webbs in the conversation was confusing even when one of them was 52 and in charge, and the other was 29 and still learning to walk without wincing. He told me to check DEA archives, Masterson continued. Operation Scorpion Strike, 2008 to 2009. Task Force targeting Mateo Valdez. Hayes was already typing on her tablet, pulling up databases that probably required clearances. Masterson didn't technically have, but also didn't technically not have if you knew which systems to access and which questions not to ask. Her face went pale as she read. Oh, she said. Oh, hell. She turned the tablet so everyone could see. Operation Scorpion Strike After Action Report, December 2008. Raid on suspected Valdez safe house. 6 DEA agents involved. 2 agents killed in action. Special Agent Daniel Torres, age 34. Special Agent Mara Hale, age 29. Torres confirmed dead at scene. Hale missing, presumed captured or killed. Body never recovered. Official declaration of death, June 2009. Masterson felt something cold settle into his chest. Mara Hale, MH, age 29. Missing, never found. Hayes pulled up a personnel photo. Young woman, dark hair, intense eyes that looked directly at the camera with the kind of focus that suggested she saw more than most people wanted to reveal. Height 5'7", build athletic, background, Army before DEA, Special Operations qualified, expert marksman, decorated for valor twice. Garcia stared at the screen. That could be Ghost. Timeline matches. Disappeared in 2008, Ghost starts operating in 2009. Same region, same targets. If she survived, Webb said slowly, if she somehow got out and decided to keep fighting on her own terms. Then she's been at war for 16 years, Vance finished. Alone, without support, without backup. just her and whatever she could carry. Masterson read through the incident report again, looking for details that mattered. Torres and Hale were investigating Valdez's trafficking network, built a case, financial records, trafficking routes, murder connections. Case got buried because Valdez had protection, political connections, maybe corruption at high levels. Torres and Hale went rogue, attempted unsanctioned raid. It was a trap. Torres killed, Hale captured. Captured, Park said quietly. Not killed, captured. That means they kept her alive. For 6 days, according to this, Hayes said, pulling up another document. DEA search and rescue operations. They found evidence Hale had been held at the safe house for almost a week before she escaped. No details on her condition when she got out. Masterson closed his eyes and tried not to imagine what 6 days in cartel custody would do to a person. Tried not to think about the kinds of things that happened when professional criminals got their hands on a federal agent who tried to dismantle their empire. Tried not to connect the dots between a 29-year-old DEA agent full of conviction and a ghost who'd spent 16 years killing cartel soldiers with the kind of methodical patience that suggested someone keeping score. We need to find her, he said. Why, Vance asked. Not challenging, genuinely asking. Because nobody has had her back for 16 years, Masterson said. Because she saved our lives when she had no obligation to. Because if the roles were reversed, I'd want someone to care enough to look. That night, an envelope appeared under Masterson's apartment door. No postmark, no return address, just his name written in careful block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper, heavily redacted, with a classification marking at the top that suggested someone was risking their career by sharing this. The memo was dated 6 months after Mara Hale's disappearance, addressed to someone whose name had been blacked out, regarding the status of a federal agent who officially didn't exist anymore. Most of the content was redacted, but the parts that remained told a story that Masterson wished he didn't have to read. Agent Hale survived cartel capture, escaped after 6 days, refused extraction when located, psychological evaluation, extreme PTSD, survivor guilt regarding Torres' death, stated intent to continue operations independently, offered medical discharge with honors, refused, offered trauma counseling, refused. When pressed regarding future plans, subject stated, protocols failed. Protocols let Valdez escape, done following protocols. Recommendation, declare Agent Hale deceased, provides family closure and removes DEA liability for future independent actions. Status, approved. Agent Hale confirmed operating independently for 11 months. Multiple confirmed interventions against Valdez operations. 0 civilian casualties. Asset is effective but cannot be officially acknowledged. Masterson read the memo 3 times. Each time the words hit harder. They knew. DEA knew she was alive. Knew she was operating. Let her go because she was getting results they couldn't achieve through official channels. Declared her dead so they wouldn't be responsible when she eventually got herself killed doing the work they couldn't sanction. 16 years. 16 years of being a ghost because being alive meant answering to people who'd let the system fail when it mattered most. He called the team. Emergency meeting. His apartment. Right now, don't tell anyone where you're going. They arrived within an hour, all of them. Even Webb, who probably shouldn't have been driving with his legs still healing, but came anyway because when someone says emergency meeting at midnight, you show up and ask questions later. Masterson handed them the memo. Watched their faces as they read. Watched the realizations settle in like frost. They let her go, Garcia said. His voice carried the kind of anger that comes from being young enough to still believe systems should work the way they're supposed to. They knew she was alive, and they just let her fight alone because it was convenient. Because she was effective, Hayes corrected. 200-plus cartel soldiers dead, trafficking routes disrupted, countless lives saved. She gave them results they couldn't get legally, and all it cost them was the career of one agent they'd already declared dead. That's not justice, Park said. That's pragmatism wearing justice as a mask. Masterson pulled up another file. Daniel Torres, 34 when he died, 11 years DEA, specialized in financial crimes and cartel money laundering. Built cases that were airtight, thorough, the kind of work that put people away for decades when the system bothered to file charges. He scrolled to a memorial page someone had set up after Torres died. Photos of a man who looked like he smiled easy and meant it, Tributes from colleagues talking about integrity and dedication and all the words people use when they're trying to capture something important about someone who's gone. The comments section went back years. Masterson scrolled through. Most were from friends, family, former partners sharing memories. But one comment dated 2018 made him stop. Anonymous post, no name, just words that hit like bullets. Daniel, I'm still fighting, so tired, but can't stop. Not while he's still out there. Sorry I couldn't save you. Posted 9 years after Torres died, by someone who still visited his memorial page, by someone who was still apologizing for failing to prevent something that wasn't preventable. Vance leaned over Masterson's shoulder and read the comment. Her voice came out rough. That's her. That's Mara Hale. Still carrying it. Still fighting. Still alone. We need to find a way to contact her, Masterson said, to let her know she doesn't have to do this alone anymore. Hayes shook her head. She's been off-grid for 16 years. If she wanted to be found, she would be. The fact that she's stayed hidden this long means she's better at disappearing than we are at investigating. Then we make her want to be found, Masterson said. We make enough noise that she can't ignore us. 3 days later, Masterson got word through channels he probably shouldn't have accessed that someone wanted to meet him. Frank Carbone, retired DEA, terminal cancer, nothing left to lose and everything to say before the end came. They met at a coffee shop in Scottsdale. Carbone looked like someone death had already started collecting on, thin and gray and moving with the careful precision of a man whose body was betraying him one system at a time. But his eyes were sharp, and when he shook Masterson's hand, his grip was still strong. You're asking about Mara and Danny, Carbone said without preamble. Sat down and ordered black coffee and got straight to the point because when you're dying, you don't waste time on courtesy. I need to understand what happened, Masterson said. Carbone stared into his coffee like he was reading prophecy in the grounds. They were the best team I ever worked with. Perfect balance. Danny was the detail guy, could track money through shell companies and offshore accounts like he was reading street signs. Mara was the operator, could kick down doors and clear rooms and do all the physical work that cases require when the paperwork runs out. And they were going to get married, had the date set, venue booked, whole future planned out. What went wrong, Masterson asked. Mateo Valdez went wrong, Carbone said. His voice carried the kind of bitter certainty that comes from watching good people die for bad reasons. Danny and Mara spent 3 years building a case. Trafficking networks, financial structures, murder connections, everything you need to put someone away for life, times 10. They had him, dead to rights, evidence that would have survived any appeal. But, Masterson prompted, but Valdez had protection, Carbone said. Mexican officials on payroll, maybe someone in U.S. government, though we never proved it. Case got buried. Orders came down from above. Drop the investigation, reassign the agents, move on to other targets. Danny couldn't accept it. He'd seen what Valdez did. Kids trafficked, women brutalized, families destroyed. You don't just walk away from that because someone in an office decides it's politically inconvenient. So they went rogue, Masterson said. Carbone nodded. Danny found the safe house. Convinced Mara to do an unsanctioned raid. Just the two of them and 4 backup agents. Quick in and out. Capture Valdez, or at least gather evidence that couldn't be buried. It was supposed to take 30 minutes. It was a trap, Masterson finished. Complete setup. Someone warned Valdez, probably the same someone who buried the case. Backup team got ambushed before they reached the safe house. Danny and Mara went in alone. Danny took 3 rounds center mass, died in Mara's arms before she could even try to get him out. She was captured, trying to drag his body to safety. Masterson felt his jaw tighten. What happened during those 6 days? Carbone's face went dark. The kind of dark that comes from knowing things you wish you could forget. Valdez tortured her, not for information because she didn't have anything he needed. He did it because she dared to come after him, because he wanted to break her, wanted to make an example, wanted her to understand that people like her don't win against people like him. But she escaped, Masterson said. Got out on day 6, Carbone confirmed. Killed 2 guards, stole weapons, fought her way out through 12 cartel soldiers. DEA found her 3 days later in the desert, dehydrated, infected wounds, barely conscious. When they tried to bring her in, she pulled a gun on them, said if they tried to take her back, she'd disappear for good and they'd never find the body. What did they do? Masterson asked, even though he already knew the answer. They let her go, Carbone said, because she'd already started hunting. In those 3 days between her escape and DEA finding her, she'd killed 4 of Valdez's lieutenants. 4 confirmed kills in 72 hours while wounded and running on pure hate. DEA brass looked at that and made a calculation. Official agent, they had to follow rules, file reports, respect jurisdictions. Dead agent who nobody knew was alive, she could do things they couldn't sanction, but needed done. That's the memo, Masterson said. Declaration of death. Official cover. Exactly, Carbone said. They declared her KIA, gave her family closure, and let her become a ghost. For 16 years, she's been hunting Valdez and his network. 200 plus kills, maybe more. Thousands of lives saved from trafficking. And DEA just watches and pretends they don't know. Carbone paused, then leaned forward. But here's what you need to know that isn't in any report. About 3 years ago, Mara started changing her approach. She began training others. Young operators, mostly women, people with their own reasons for fighting. She's been building a network, teaching them what she knows, creating something that could outlast her. A network, Masterson said. She's not completely alone anymore? Not anymore, Carbone confirmed. There's at least one I know about. Elena Ruiz, former Army Ranger sniper, 28 years old, lost her sister to trafficking. Mara found her, trained her, gave her purpose. Last I heard, Elena was operating in the Sonora sector, conducting the same kind of work Mara's been doing. Professional, disciplined, effective. But unlike Mara, Elena's willing to work with others. She's the bridge between Mara's old way and a new approach. Why are you telling me this? Masterson asked. Because I'm dying, Carbone said simply. Stage 4, maybe 3 months if I'm lucky. And because Mara Hale saved your team even though she had no reason to. That means something. That means she still remembers what it's like to care about people beyond just killing the bad guys. I'm telling you because maybe you can reach her in a way DEA never could. And maybe Elena can help with that. She's more open to cooperation than Mara's ever been. He slid 2 pieces of paper across the table. 2 satellite phone numbers, both written in shaky handwriting. One labeled MH, the other ER. Mara checks hers once a month, Carbone said. Elena checks hers weekly. Don't abuse these numbers. Don't try to trace them. Just, if you're going to help them, make sure you're ready. Because once you're in their world, once you see what they've seen and done what they've done, there's no going back to normal. Masterson took the papers and memorized both numbers before folding them into his pocket. What drives someone to fight alone for 16 years? Love, Carbone said. Danny Torres was the love of her life. She's been fighting for 16 years because stopping would mean accepting that he died for nothing. Accepting that Valdez gets to keep destroying lives. Accepting that the system failed and there's nothing she can do about it. So she doesn't stop. Can't stop. Won't stop until Valdez is dead or she is. That's not sustainable, Masterson said. No, Carbone agreed, it's not, but it's what she's got. Masterson sent the message 2 days later after staring at the satellite phone number for 48 hours and trying to find words that mattered. Settled on simple because complicated felt like lying. This is Captain Cole Masterson, Border Patrol. You saved my team in Skeleton Canyon. I know who you are. I know what you've been doing. I want to help. 24 hours, no response. 48 hours. Nothing but silence and the growing certainty that maybe Carbone had been wrong. Maybe the number didn't work anymore. Maybe Mara Hale had moved on to some other method of staying invisible. 72 hours. Text message. Coordinates in the Arizona desert. Instructions that were clear enough. Come alone. No weapons. No wire. No backup. Vance looked at the coordinates when Masterson showed her. This could be a trap, she said. If she wanted me dead, I'd already be dead, Masterson said. She had clear shots on all of us in that canyon. She chose to save us instead. That means something. Or it means she had other priorities and you were convenient, Vance countered. Cole, you're about to walk into the desert alone to meet someone who's been conducting an illegal vigilante war for 16 years. Someone who's killed over 200 people. Someone who, according to every psychological evaluation, is suffering from severe PTSD and survivor guilt and God knows what else after being tortured by cartels. You need backup. If I bring backup, she won't show, Masterson said. This is about trust. She saved my life. Least I can do is trust her enough to show up when she asks. The coordinates led to an abandoned mine in the desert outside Tucson. The kind of place where Arizona's past had collapsed into ruins and nobody bothered to clean up because the desert did that work for free given enough time. Masterson arrived at dusk when the light turned everything gold and amber and the shadows stretched long enough to hide secrets. Mara Hale stepped out from behind a support beam. First time Masterson had seen her clearly without tactical gear obscuring features. First time he could see the face that matched the DEA personnel photo from 16 years ago. She'd aged in ways that weren't just about time. 45 years old, but carrying weight that made her look both younger and older, depending on how the light hit. Dark hair pulled back functional and tight. Eyes that had seen too much and remembered everything. She moved like a trained operator, balanced and controlled, and ready to react to threats that hadn't materialized yet. "You shouldn't have looked for me," she said. Her voice was the same as the radio, calm and certain, and carrying the kind of authority that comes from making life and death decisions until they become routine. "You saved my life," Masterson said. "My team's lives. I couldn't let that go." "Most people do," she said. "I'm not most people." She studied him with the kind of attention that suggested she'd already researched everything about him that databases could provide and was now looking for the details that numbers and service records couldn't capture. Captain Cole Masterson, 38, divorced, 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie, ages 12 and 9, 14 years Border Patrol, exemplary record, 3 commendations. Your ex-wife says you care more about saving strangers than being present for family. Your daughters say they love you but wish you were home more. You're a good man trying to do good work in a system that makes that harder than it should be. Masterson felt something cold run down his spine. "You researched me." "I research everyone," she said. "It's how I stay alive." 16 years of being hunted teaches you that information is the only real advantage, and knowledge is the difference between surviving and becoming a statistic that gets filed under lessons learned. 16 years, Masterson said. "Daniel Torres, Mateo Valdez." "I know." Her expression hardened into something that might have been anger, or might have been the kind of pain that gets compressed so tightly it comes out looking like rage. "Then you know why I can't stop." "I know why you started," Masterson said. "But 16 years, Mara, that's not a mission. That's a life sentence." "It's the life I chose," she said. "Did you?" Masterson asked. "Or did circumstances choose it for you, and you've been too busy fighting to realize you could make different choices?" Long silence. Wind moved through the ruined mine, carrying desert dust and the smell of creosote and all the small sounds that empty places make when they're not quite empty. Mara stared at him with eyes that suggested she was calculating threat levels and exit strategies, and whether this conversation was worth continuing, or if walking away would be simpler. "What do you want, Captain?" she asked finally. "I want to help you finish this," Masterson said. "You can't help me," she said. "Why not?" "Because when I finish this, one of 2 things happens. Either Valdez dies or I do. Either way, anyone standing next to me becomes a target. I won't risk that." "You risked it for us in that canyon," Masterson said. "That was different," she said. "You were collateral damage in someone else's war. Civilians caught in crossfire. This," she gestured at nothing and everything, "this is my war. My choice. My risk." "Then make it ours," Masterson said. "Let us help. Let us have your back the way you had ours." "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk that?" "Because you shouldn't have to fight alone," Masterson said. "Because my team owes you our lives. And because what you've been doing for 16 years, saving people, stopping traffickers, disrupting networks, that matters. Someone should acknowledge that. Someone should make sure you survive long enough to see it through." She laughed, dry and bitter. "Survive. I stopped worrying about surviving around year 3. Now I just worry about finishing." "What if you could do both?" Masterson asked. "What if you could finish the mission and survive to see what comes after?" "There is no after," Mara said. "There's just Valdez and me, and whoever's still standing when it's over." Masterson pulled out his phone and showed her the file he'd been building. 47 incidents, 200 confirmed kills, estimated 5,000 lives saved from trafficking. 16 years of operations that officially never happened, conducted by someone who officially doesn't exist. "You've been keeping score," she said. "Someone should," Masterson said. "Someone should remember that when the system failed, you didn't. When everyone else walked away, you stayed. That deserves recognition." "Recognition gets people killed," Mara said. "The moment anyone acknowledges what I'm doing, I become a target for every agency that wants to make an example, and every cartel that wants revenge. Anonymity is the only thing keeping me alive. Then let us help anonymously, Masterson said. My team, off the books. No official reports, no acknowledgement, just backup when you need it and extraction when things go wrong. Mara stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her own phone and made a call. Short conversation, mostly listening. When she hung up, her expression had shifted slightly. There's someone I want you to meet, she said. Someone who's been working with me. Someone who might be the bridge you need to understand how this could actually work. 20 minutes later, a second figure approached the mine. Younger than Mara, late 20s, moving with the same tactical grace but carrying herself with less weight. When she got close enough, Masterson could see professional equipment, precision rifle, the look of someone who'd been taught by the best and learned every lesson. Captain Masterson, Mara said, this is Elena Ruiz, former Army Ranger, expert marksman, and the first person I've trained who actually understands that some fights require more than one operator. Elena extended her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Captain, Mara's told me about Skeleton Canyon. 6 souls saved because she couldn't walk away. That's who she is. That's what she does. And you, Masterson asked. I'm learning to do the same, Elena said. But smarter, with support, with people who can provide backup and extraction instead of doing everything solo and hoping luck holds. Mara's been fighting alone for 16 years. I've been operating for 3. In those 3 years, I've learned that the work is more sustainable when you're not carrying everything yourself. Mara looked at Elena with something that might have been pride, or might have been the recognition that her student had surpassed her in wisdom, if not yet in skill. She's right, Mara said quietly. I've known it for a while, but I couldn't admit it. The solo approach worked because I had nothing to lose. But that's not sustainable. That's not a model for lasting change. She turned back to Masterson. If I accept help, if I bring you into this, it's on my terms, my operation, my rules. Your people provide support only. And if it goes sideways, if someone's going to die, you walk away. No one dies for my vendetta except me. Deal, Masterson said. What's the next move? Mara pulled out a tablet and brought up surveillance photos. Mateo Valdez's daughter is getting married. 3 weeks. Hermosillo, Mexico. Cathedral ceremony, reception at a hacienda outside the city. He'll attend. First time he's left his compound in 18 months. Elena and I have been planning this for 2 years. What's the objective, Masterson asked. Originally, kill him, Mara said. Put a bullet in his head and finish what Danny started. But lately I've been thinking, Danny believed in justice, not revenge. Believed the system could work if good people made it work. Maybe it's time I honored that belief. Meaning, Masterson prompted. Meaning I extract Valdez alive, she said. Deliver him to authorities who can't be bought. I have 16 years of evidence. Financial records, trafficking routes, murder connections, witness testimony from people I've saved. Enough to put him away for life in any court that isn't corrupt. That's what Danny would have wanted. Justice through the system he believed in, Elena added. And with proper support, with coordinated extraction and backup, the success rate goes from maybe 40% to over 80%. That's what working as a team provides. Higher probability of mission success and everyone going home alive. And if extraction fails, Masterson asked. Mara's eyes went cold in a way that suggested she'd spent 16 years preparing for exactly that contingency. Then I make sure he never hurts anyone again. One way or another, Valdez's reign ends at that wedding. She handed Masterson an encrypted communicator, small and black and probably worth more than his monthly salary. 3 weeks. I'll send operational details. Elena will coordinate support requirements. Until then, tell no one. Not your team yet, not your superiors, not family. If this goes wrong, everyone needs plausible deniability. And if we pull this off, Masterson asked, then maybe, she said, and something in her voice suggested she didn't quite believe it, maybe after 16 years I can finally stop running. Elena spoke up. And maybe we prove that this work can continue beyond one person's vendetta, that we can build something sustainable that saves lives without burning out the operators. That's the real mission, not just stopping Valdez, building a model that works long-term. Mara looked at her protege with something close to affection. She's the optimist, Mara said. I'm still working on that part. She turned to leave, Elena following, both of them moving back toward the shadows that had produced them. Mara, Masterson called. She stopped but didn't turn. Thank you for saving us, for trusting us enough to let us help, for being what the system couldn't be. Don't thank me yet, she said. Wedding is in 3 weeks. Lots of time for things to go wrong. Lots of time for me to remember why working alone is safer. But you're not alone anymore, Masterson said. That's the point. Mara glanced back at Elena, then at Masterson. No, she said quietly. I guess I'm not. Then they were gone, vanished into the ruins and the gathering dark like they'd never been there at all. Masterson stood alone in the abandoned mine and looked at the communicator in his hand. Small device, huge implications. 3 weeks to prepare for an operation that was illegal in at least 4 different ways and morally necessary in ways that made the illegal part seem trivial. The communicator buzzed. Message incoming. He opened it. Photo of Mateo Valdez, current high resolution, timestamp from yesterday. Professional surveillance work. Caption below the image. The devil walks free, for now. Masterson stared at the photo. Valdez looked like a businessman. Distinguished. Successful. The kind of man you'd see at charity galas and political fundraisers. Not someone responsible for thousands of destroyed lives and decades of suffering. That was the problem with evil. It rarely looked like what people expected. Rarely announced itself with horns and pitchforks. Usually it wore suits and smiled and shook hands and destroyed everything it touched while maintaining perfect deniability. 3 weeks, Masterson thought. 3 weeks to plan an operation that would either end a 16-year hunt or get everyone involved killed trying. He drove home through the Arizona night, thinking about choices and consequences, and the way good people sometimes had to do questionable things because the alternative was letting evil win by default. Thinking about Mara Hale and Daniel Torres and 16 years of fighting that was finally evolving beyond one person's crusade. Thinking about Elena Ruiz and the network that was being built, one operator at a time, proving that sustainable change required more than solo heroics. The communicator buzzed again. Different message this time. 3 words. Watch your back. Masterson didn't need to ask what that meant. Vicente Garza's threat from 6 months ago. Valdez knew someone had disrupted his operation in Skeleton Canyon. Knew someone had saved Border Patrol agents who should have died. Knew that whoever did that was still out there and still a problem that needed solving. 3 weeks, Masterson thought again. 3 weeks until everything either came together or fell apart in ways that couldn't be predicted or controlled or survived by people who weren't ready. He sent a message back, 1 word. Ready? The response came immediately. 2 replies, different numbers. Mara's first. Good, because ready is all we've got. Then Elena's. And this time we were ready together. That changes everything. 3 weeks moves fast when you're planning an operation that exists in the space between legal and necessary. Cole Masterson learned this while sitting in a safe house 20 miles outside Tucson, surrounded by his team and equipment that technically didn't exist on any official inventory, preparing to conduct an extraction on foreign soil that would violate at least 4 international treaties and probably end with everyone in the room losing their careers if things went sideways. The safe house belonged to Frank Lyons, the suit guy from Masterson's first debriefing after Skeleton Canyon. Turned out Lyons was DEA Internal Affairs, which meant he'd spent 20 years watching good agents get burned by bad systems, and he'd decided that sometimes the rules needed bending if the alternative was letting monsters walk free. He'd shown up 2 weeks into the planning phase, walked into the safe house without knocking, and announced that he was providing unofficial support because Mara Hale had done more to stop Mateo Valdez in 16 years than DEA had accomplished in 25. If this operation fails, Lyons said to the assembled team, you're all burned, no federal protection, no official acknowledgement. I will deny everything and produce documentation proving I was in Washington during the entire event. But if it succeeds, if you bring Valdez in alive with evidence that can't be buried, then maybe we can finally close a case that should have been closed 16 years ago. Why risk your career for this? Elena Vance asked. You're DEA brass. You could just order an official operation. Because official operations require approvals that Valdez's connections will block, Lyons said. Because by the time we get authorization, he'll be gone. Because Mara Hale has spent 16 years conducting a war that we should have supported from day one, and the least we can do is give her a fighting chance to finish it the right way. Justice instead of revenge. Evidence instead of execution. That's worth risking a pension. Masterson spread the operational map across the table. Hermosillo Cathedral, he said, pointing to a building marked in red on the satellite image. Ceremony at 1400 hours. Approximately 300 guests, 40-plus security personnel, local police on Valdez's payroll providing additional coverage. Reception follows at a hacienda 15 kilometers outside the city. That's our extraction window. When Valdez moves from cathedral to vehicles, when he's in motion between secure locations. Rachel Hayes pulled up electronic surveillance data on her laptop. I've been monitoring their communications for 2 weeks, she said. Security frequencies, encryption patterns, shift rotations. They're professional but predictable. They sweep for threats every 2 hours. They have counter sniper teams on 3 buildings overlooking the cathedral. They've got drones doing thermal sweeps at random intervals. But they're focused on external threats. They're not expecting someone to infiltrate as part of the ceremony itself. That's where I come in, Mara Hale said. She'd been standing in the corner with Elena Ruiz, both of them studying the map with the kind of focus that suggested they had already memorized every detail and were now looking for the things the map didn't show. I'll be inside. Catering staff. Valdez's people vet the primary personnel, but they're sloppy with support workers. I've already established a cover identity with the catering company. Day of the wedding, I'll have access to the reception area before Valdez arrives. Elena spoke up, and I'll be positioned on the eastern ridge, 1,200 meters out, too far for their counter-sniper teams to consider a threat, close enough that I have overlapping coverage with Marcus. If things go wrong, if Mara needs extraction support, we can provide suppressing fire and create corridors. How do you extract him from inside, Danny Garcia asked. He'd healed up from his shoulder injury, but still moved carefully, still carried the weight of remembering what it felt like to almost die. You can't carry him out. Security will spot that in seconds. Tranquilizer, Mara said. Fast acting puts him down in 30 seconds, makes it look like a medical emergency. Heart attack, stroke, something that requires immediate evacuation. In the chaos of a medical crisis, nobody questions the ambulance that arrives. Nobody stops the paramedics who load him up and drive away. Except we're the ambulance, Masterson said. We're the paramedics. We're the ones who make sure that ambulance drives to the border instead of a hospital. Marcus Webb, still using a cane but cleared for light duty, studied the map. I can provide overwatch, he said. I'm not running foot chases, but I can still shoot. Put me on a rooftop 800 meters out with good sight lines. If things go wrong, if Mara needs cover fire, I can provide it. Your leg, Vance started, is healed enough, Webb interrupted. Maybe not perfect, maybe not what it was, but good enough to stabilize a rifle and make the shots that matter. You want me sitting this out while everyone else risks their lives for someone who saved mine? That's not happening. Elena looked at Webb with professional respect. Army Ranger to Border Patrol Specialist. We'll coordinate fire sectors. You take southern approach, I'll take eastern. Between us, we can cover 80% of the cathedral perimeter. Anything Mara can't handle, we drop before it becomes a problem. Amy Park, who'd been quiet through most of the planning because her concussion had left her uncertain about her own capabilities, spoke up. I can coordinate from here, run communications, monitor police frequencies, track GPS, provide real-time intelligence. You need someone managing the information flow who isn't in the middle of combat stress. That's my role. Masterson looked around the table at his team, plus the 2 women who'd spent years fighting in shadows. 8 people, all volunteers, all risking everything because 16 years ago, a woman named Mara Hale decided that some fights were worth fighting even when the system said walk away. 8 people proving that sustainable operations required more than solo heroics. We go in 3 days, he said. 72 hours to finalize positions, confirm equipment, rehearse contingencies. This is not a sanctioned operation. If we're caught, we're foreign nationals conducting illegal operations on Mexican soil. That means Mexican prison or worse. Everyone needs to understand the stakes. We understand, Garcia said. The kid was 24, but he'd aged in ways that combat does to people, had learned that sometimes courage means doing the scared thing anyway because the alternative is living with cowardice. We understand, and we're in. The morning of the wedding, Masterson woke up in a hotel room in Hermosillo with his heart already racing, and the knowledge that in 12 hours everything would either be finished or ruined beyond repair. He checked his equipment 3 times, even though he'd checked it the night before and the night before that. checked his sidearm, his spare magazines, his communication gear, his medical kit, checked everything until checking became ritual, and ritual became the only thing keeping panic at bay. The encrypted communicator buzzed. Message from Mara. In position. Catering uniform fits. Security badge cleared. I'm inside the cathedral now. Valdez arrives in 90 minutes. Second message. From Elena. Ridge position secured. Wind calm. Visibility excellent. I have clear sight lines to cathedral east entrance and main courtyard. Ready for anything. Masterson sent back acknowledgement and started getting ready. Civilian clothes that let him blend with the crowd. Tourist camera that was actually high-powered optics. Rental car that was actually equipped with equipment that no rental company would ever approve. He was playing the part of American tourist wandering Hermosillo's historic district. Just another person with a camera, taking photos of beautiful architecture that happened to include the cathedral where Mateo Valdez's daughter was getting married. Webb was already in position, 800 meters from the cathedral, on a building that gave him overlapping fields of fire and multiple exit routes. Elena was on her ridge, 1,200 meters out, far enough to avoid counter-sniper detection, but close enough that her shots would matter. Vance and Garcia were staged with the ambulance, legitimate emergency vehicle that Lyons had arranged through contacts who didn't ask questions. Hayes was running communications from the safe house with Park, both of them managing the information flow that would keep everyone alive or at least give them warning before everything collapsed. The cathedral filled with guests starting at 1300 hours. Masterson watched through his tourist optics, cataloging faces, counting security personnel, mapping patterns. 42 guards visible, probably more concealed. Professional spacing, overlapping coverage. The kind of security that suggested Valdez knew people wanted him dead and took precautions seriously. Valdez himself arrived at 13:45, 15 minutes before ceremony start. 60 years old and looking like a businessman, distinguished gray hair, an expensive suit, and the kind of bearing that suggested authority earned through success rather than violence. He moved through the crowd shaking hands, smiling, playing the role of proud father whose daughter was getting married. Nobody looking at him would see the monster. Nobody would know that this man was responsible for thousands of destroyed lives and decades of suffering hidden behind the mask of respectability. Masterson's communicator buzzed, Mara's voice calm and professional. I have visual on primary target. He's in the third row, cathedral left side. Clear sightline from the altar. I can take the shot right now if we're changing plans. Negative, Masterson said. We extract alive. We do this the right way. Copy, Mara said. Standing by. Elena's voice joined the channel. Eastern approach clear. No counter-sniper activity detected. They're focused inward, not scanning perimeter. We have the advantage. The ceremony began at 1400 exactly. Traditional Catholic wedding, full mass, all the ritual and pageantry that made these events stretch 4 hours. Masterson watched through his optics as Valdez's daughter walked down the aisle, as vows were exchanged, as the priest blessed the union and pronounced them married. Watched Valdez in the crowd, watched him smile and wipe tears and play the part of emotional father while carrying the weight of crimes that would fill volumes. Ceremony concluded at 1520. Guests began moving toward the cathedral exit, toward the waiting vehicles that would transport them to the hacienda for the reception. This was the window. This was the moment when Valdez would be in motion, between secure locations, vulnerable for the 30 seconds it took to move from building to car. Mara's voice on the comm, moving to intercept, stay off channel unless emergency. Masterson watched her through the optics. She'd positioned herself near the cathedral side exit, the one that Valdez's security would use to avoid the crowd. Dressed in catering uniform that made her invisible, just another worker setting up for the reception, nobody worth noticing or remembering. Valdez appeared at the side exit with 6 security personnel surrounding him in a protective box. Professional close protection, the kind of formation that said these men had training and experience and would die before they let anything happen to their principal. They moved as a unit toward the waiting SUV, armored vehicle with bulletproof glass and run-flat tires and all the precautions that money could buy. Mara stepped into their path carrying a tray of champagne glasses, smiled like she was offering refreshments, stumbled like she was clumsy, fell against Valdez like it was an accident. The security team moved to intercept, but she was already stepping back, apologizing profusely in perfect Spanish, bowing and backing away while Valdez brushed champagne off his suit and looked annoyed but not alarmed. She'd gotten him. Masterson saw it even though he was 800 meters away. Saw the way Valdez's expression shifted from annoyed to confused to concerned in the space of 10 seconds. Saw him sway slightly. Saw his hand go to his chest. Saw him say something to his security team that made them grab him as his knees buckled. "Medical emergency," someone shouted. Security personnel calling for help, waving for the ambulance that was conveniently staged nearby for exactly this kind of situation. Vance and Garcia moving fast, professional paramedics responding to a crisis, loading Valdez onto a stretcher, while security personnel shouted questions and demanded to accompany their boss and got told that only immediate family could ride in the ambulance, and time was critical. The ambulance pulled away with lights and sirens, legitimate emergency vehicle that nobody questioned, because why would they question medical personnel helping someone who appeared to be having a heart attack? It drove through Hermosillo streets, following a route that Hayes had plotted to avoid checkpoints and police stops. Drove until it reached the border crossing where Leon's had arranged for expedited passage with customs agents who'd been told to look the other way for the next 10 minutes. "Extract successful," Vance's voice on the comm. "Package is secure and stable. ETA to U.S. custody 15 minutes. Masterson felt something release in his chest. 16 years. 16 years of hunting, and now it was done. Mara had gotten him, had extracted him alive, had done it the right way, justice instead of revenge, evidence instead of execution. His communicator exploded with chatter. Hayes's voice urgent and scared. "All units, we have a problem. Multiple explosions at the hacienda. Reports of gunfire, federal police moving in force. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't—" Masterson's blood went cold. "What's happening?" "Rival cartel," Hayes said. She was pulling data from multiple sources, translating chaos into information. "Cartel del Golfo is hitting the reception. They're not after Valdez. They're after his territory. They waited until he left the cathedral, and now they're attacking everyone at the hacienda. Boss, there are civilians caught in the crossfire. 300 wedding guests and probably 50 cartel soldiers fighting over territory." Elena's voice cut through the chatter, professional and controlled. "How many civilians trapped?" Hayes checked her sources. At least 200 still inside the hacienda. "They're trapped. Federal police have the perimeter locked down, but they're not going in because they don't know who's shooting who. People are dying in there." Mara's voice, calm despite the chaos. "Cole, we have Valdez. Mission's technically complete. But 200 civilians need extraction, and no one's coming for them." "Stand by," Masterson said. He needed to think, needed to make a decision that balanced mission success against moral obligation. They had Valdez. 16 years of hunting was over. The smart play was to extract, get everyone to safety, let Mexican authorities handle the cartel violence. But Mara Hale had never made the smart play. "Not over until the civilians are safe," Masterson said. "Mara, Elena, what's your status?" "Already moving," Mara said. "I'm 2 minutes from the hacienda. I have overwatch from the ridge," Elena added. "Give me targets and I'll drop them." "But Cole, there's a lot of them. We're going to need everyone," Webb's voice joined. "I can relocate. Give me 15 minutes to get a new position." "Do it," Masterson ordered. "Garcia, can you swing the ambulance back after you secure Valdez?" "Vance is staying with the package," Garcia confirmed. "I'm mobile in 5. "Hayes, coordinate with Mexican emergency services," Masterson ordered. "Tell them we have medical personnel on site ready to receive wounded." "Working on it," Hayes said. Masterson started running toward the hacienda. 6 months ago, he'd been dying in a canyon because someone had decided his team was acceptable collateral damage. Mara had saved them when she had no obligation to. Now 200 people needed saving, and walking away would mean becoming the kind of person who calculated acceptable losses in human lives. The hacienda was chaos when Masterson arrived. Gunfire from multiple directions, smoke rising from burning vehicles, screaming civilians trying to find cover behind walls and hedges that wouldn't stop bullets. Federal police had the perimeter surrounded, but nobody was moving in because nobody wanted to be the first one through the door when 2 cartel factions were shooting each other inside. Masterson found Mara at the east wall. She changed out of the catering uniform into tactical gear that she'd staged earlier, was carrying her rifle and moving with the kind of purposeful calm that it suggested she'd done this exact thing so many times that terror couldn't find purchase anymore. "How many exits?" she asked without looking at him. "Three accessible," Masterson said. "Main entrance is covered by cartel soldiers. West exit is blocked by fire. East exit here is clear, but it's a killing field, 50 meters of open ground to reach cover." "Then we make it not a killing field," Mara said. She keyed her comm. "Elena, Webb, I need you to drop anyone who moves into the east courtyard with a weapon." "Can you do that?" Elena responded first. "I have visual on 6 hostiles from my position. Clear shots on 4. I can see 3 more from here," Webb added. "Give me the word." "Word given," Mara said. 7 shots in 9 seconds. 4 from Elena at 1,200 meters. 3 from Webb at 800. 7 bodies dropping in the courtyard. Professional marksmanship from 2 operators who'd never trained together but moved like they'd been coordinating for years. The courtyard cleared and suddenly there was a path. "Masterson, you're with me," Mara said. "We go in, we move civilians to this exit, we get them to the ambulance staging area. Simple extraction. Don't shoot unless you have to. Every bullet we fire is one more thing that can go wrong." They moved into the hacienda through the east exit. Inside was worse than outside. Overturned tables, shattered glass, blood pooling on expensive tile, civilians hiding behind furniture and under tables, terror making them small and frozen. Cartel soldiers fighting room to room, professional soldiers too focused on killing each other to notice 2 people moving through the chaos with purpose. Masterson found 30 civilians in the main reception hall, trapped because both exits were blocked by gunfire. Mara moved through them like smoke, calm and commanding, telling them in Spanish to follow her, to stay low, to move fast when she said move. Most were too scared to question orders delivered with that much authority. They followed. Getting them out was surgical work. Mara would clear a path, Elena and Webb would drop anyone who tried to block it, and Masterson would shepherd civilians through while trying not to think about the 1,000 ways this could fail. They made 3 trips, 30 civilians, then 40, then 50. Vance had returned with the ambulance and was loading them into any vehicle available. Ambulance and police cars and civilian trucks. Anything that could move people to safety. Elena's voice on the comm. "Mara, I've got movement on your 6. 3 hostiles coming through the western corridor. I don't have the angle." Webb responded immediately. "I've got 2 of them. 3rd one's in dead space from my position." Mara moved fluid and fast. "Doesn't matter. I'll handle close quarters. Keep the courtyard clear." Last group was trapped in the kitchen. 60 people, mostly catering staff and guests who'd run the wrong direction when the shooting started. Only problem was, 2 cartel soldiers had taken position in the doorway, using the trapped civilians as human shields while they fought off rivals trying to breach the room. Mara studied the situation with the kind of cold calculation that came from doing tactical math under pressure. 2 hostiles, 60 civilians, no clean shots, no way to breach without getting people killed. This was the kind of problem that had no good solutions, only choices about which kind of bad was least terrible. "Cole," she said quietly, "if I go in alone, if I draw their fire, can you get the civilians out?" "You'll get shot," Masterson said. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe not, but 60 people die for sure if we don't try." Elena's voice cut in. "Negative, I'm repositioning. Give me 90 seconds and I'll have an angle through the kitchen window." Nobody goes in alone. But the 90 seconds never came. The rival cartel breached from the opposite direction. 10 soldiers, professional and angry, shooting at anything that moved. Elena's voice urgent. "Mara, you've got multiple hostiles your position. I can drop 3, but the rest are too close." Webb added, "I'm shifting fire, engaging western approach." Mara moved without hesitation, diving through the doorway with her rifle up. Drew fire from both the door guards and the breaching team. She dropped the door guards with shots to shoulders, non-lethal, rolled behind industrial equipment as rounds punched through stainless steel. Return fire, methodical and controlled, dropping 2 of the breaching team before the rest found cover. Masterson was already moving, herding civilians toward the exit, shouting at them to run and not stop running until they hit the ambulance. 60 people streaming through the door, trampling over each other in their panic to escape, but alive, moving, getting out. Elena's voice over gunfire. "Mara, you're pinned. 4 hostiles have you boxed. I can drop 2, but..." "Do it," Mara said. 2 shots from 1,200 meters through a kitchen window. 2 bodies dropped. But that still left two more and Mara was taking fire from multiple angles. Webb's voice, I'm dry, reloading, 30 seconds. Masterson ran back into the kitchen, against every instinct that said running toward gunfire was how you died. Found Mara behind an overturned refrigerator, bleeding from a wound below her vest line, her face pale but her hands still steady on her weapon. Time to go, he said. 4 civilians still in corner, she said through gritted teeth, too scared to move. Elena's voice, I'll get them. Mara, you need medical now. A figure appeared at the opposite entrance. Not Cartel. Elena Ruiz, having relocated from her ridge position, moving into the hacienda because her mentor was pinned and protocols be damned. She laid down suppressing fire while moving to the trapped civilians. Professional operator doing what needed doing. The last 2 hostile soldiers fell back under Elena's assault. She got the 4 civilians moving, covered their retreat, then turned to help Mara. Together, Masterson and Elena dragged Mara toward the exit, made it out as the building collapsed into full combat, made it to the ambulance where Vance took one look at Mara's wound and started working with the kind of professional urgency that said this was bad but not fatal if they move fast. They made it across the border with Valdez sedated in one compartment and Mara bleeding in another, and 60-plus civilians following in vehicles that would arrive at hospitals with stories about American operatives who'd saved them from cartel violence. The arrest happened 8 hours later after lines coordinated with FBI and federal prosecutors and Mexican authorities who weren't corrupt. Mateo Valdez was charged with 43 counts, including murder, trafficking, conspiracy, and enough other crimes that the paperwork filled boxes. 16 years of evidence that Mara had collected, meticulously documented, preserved against the day when she could deliver it to someone who couldn't be bought. The trial lasted 3 months. Valdez's lawyers tried everything, challenged jurisdiction and evidence and witness testimony. Didn't matter. The case was airtight because Mara Hale had spent 16 years making it airtight. Every document was verified, every witness was credible, every piece of evidence was beyond dispute. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a verdict that surprised no one who'd actually reviewed the evidence. Guilty on all counts. Life sentence, no possibility of parole. 16 years of hunting. 16 years of fighting that had evolved from solo vengeance into coordinated justice. And finally, the system working the way it was supposed to. 6 months after the trial, Masterson got a message from Mara asking him to meet at that same abandoned mine where they'd first talked about working together. He drove out alone, wondering what she wanted, hoping it wasn't goodbye. She was waiting when he arrived, looking healthier than she had in months. The wound had healed, the weight had lifted, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked like someone who could imagine a future beyond the next operation. Elena Ruiz stood beside her, the partnership between mentor and student visible in the way they moved, the way they communicated with glances that carried full conversations. Frank Lyons wants me to lead a task force, Mara said without preamble. Border operations, anti-trafficking, coordinated with federal and local agencies. Legitimate operation with official sanction and actual support. Elena would be my second in command. He's offering us a chance to do what we've been doing, but with backup and resources and people who can help instead of pretending we don't exist. Are you going to take it? Masterson asked. We don't know, Elena said. For 3 years, I've been learning from Mara that this work requires more than one person. But trusting institutions after they failed once, that's hard. Daniel believed in the system, Masterson said. Maybe taking this job is how you honor what he believed. Mara smiled, sad but genuine. Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of being a ghost, tired of fighting in shadows. Elena's taught me as much as I've taught her. She's shown me that the next generation can do this work smarter, with better support, more sustainably, Elena added. And Mara's taught me that sometimes the margins are where the most important work happens. We're trying to find the balance, official enough to have resources, flexible enough to act when bureaucracy would slow us down. Either way, Masterson said, my team is with you. Whatever you decide, wherever this goes, you don't walk alone anymore. I know, Mara said. That's why I think we can do this. Take the job, work within the rules, trust that the system can work if good people make it work. Elena's already proven it's possible. 3 years of operations, 50-plus rescues, working with local and federal agencies instead of against them. That's the model. That's what I should have been building from the start. So that's a yes, Masterson asked. Mara looked at Elena, who nodded. That's a yes, Mara said. with one condition: we both bring our own rifles. 1 year later, Masterson stood in a cemetery outside Tucson at a gravestone that marked where Daniel Torres had been laid to rest 17 years ago. Mara was there, along with Elena and Masterson's entire team, and Frank Lyons, and about 30 other people who'd been touched by their work over the past year. Annual memorial service for a man who'd believed in justice and died trying to achieve it. Mara placed flowers at the grave and spoke quietly. "Danny, we finished it. Your way. Justice through the system you believed in. Valdez is in prison for life. The case you built 17 years ago finally went to trial, and we won. And we built something that will outlast both of us. A team, a network, people who understand that this work is too important to do alone." Elena stood beside her. "We've rescued 400 people this year," she said to the gravestone. 60 arrests, 0 casualties among our operators or the people we've saved. That's what working together provides. That's what you and Mara were building before it got taken away. We're finishing what you started." The wind moved through the cemetery, carrying desert dust and the smell of rain that might come later. Masterson watched Mara and Elena and saw something that went beyond mentor and student. Saw a partnership that proved sustainable, that operations required more than solo heroics. Saw the future of this work. The task force had been operational for a year now. 15 major operations resulting in 400-plus trafficking victims rescued, 60-plus arrests, 0 civilian casualties, 0 operator casualties. Legitimate operations with legitimate authority and legitimate results that could be documented in reports that wouldn't get classified and buried. After the service, as people were leaving, Lyons pulled Masterson aside. "There's something you should know," he said. "We've been getting reports. Border operations, cartel disruptions, similar patterns to what Mara was doing, but in different sectors. Someone else is out there. Someone new. Or maybe not new, maybe someone who's been watching and learning and decided to carry on the work." "Who?" Masterson asked. "Don't know," Lyons said. "Don't particularly want to know. But whoever it is, they're good, professional, effective, and they're making cartels nervous the same way Mara did." The legend continues, just with a different face. Mara and Elena overheard, walked over together, moving like operators who'd trained until coordination became instinct. "Someone's taken up the ghost mantle?" Mara asked. "Appears so," Lyons said. "You feel strongly about that?" Mara thought about it, looked at the gravestone, at the desert beyond, at Elena standing beside her. "No," she said finally. "If someone out there feels called to do this work, if they're willing to operate in the margins and fight battles the system can't fight, then I hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they don't spend 16 years alone. I hope they find their Elena sooner rather than later." Elena smiled. "And I hope they find their Mara, someone who's already walked the path and can teach them how to survive it." "That's growth," Masterson said. "That's partnership," Mara corrected. "I was lucky. Lucky Elena found me when she did. Lucky you and your team proved trust was possible. Whoever's out there now, I hope they're lucky too. I hope they build their network before the isolation breaks them." They walked back to the vehicles together. All of them part of something that had started in chaos and ended in justice and would continue in ways they couldn't predict or control. Started driving back toward Tucson and whatever missions waited there. Mara's phone buzzed, an unknown number. She opened the message. Photograph of a compound somewhere outside U.S. borders. Middle Eastern architecture, maybe. Caption read, "They call you the Desert Ghost. We could use a ghost over here. Interested?" Mara stared at the photo for a long moment. International operation, completely outside her jurisdiction. Exactly the kind of thing that would pull her back into the life she'd just escaped. She thought about Daniel Torres and 16 years of fighting alone, and the team that had proven trust was possible. She deleted the message. Masterson saw her do it, asked without asking. "Someone wanting to recruit me for overseas operations?" Mara said. "Trafficking networks in conflict zones. Probably legitimate need, probably would save lives, probably exactly the kind of thing I would have jumped at 2 years ago." "And now," Masterson asked, "now I've learned that sustainable operations require support systems," she said. "That working within legitimate channels actually achieves more than endless vigilante operations. That 16 years of being a ghost was necessary but not sustainable, and I'm done sacrificing my life for work that burns people out until there's nothing left." She looked at Elena. "But if something local comes up, Something in our jurisdiction that needs the specific skills we've developed were available. Because the work matters. Saving lives matters. Justice matters. We just want to achieve it in ways that don't require us to disappear. Elena nodded. And in ways that we can teach others, build capacity, create a model that outlasts individual operators. That's the real mission now. Fair enough, Masterson said. We've got your back. I know, Mara said. That's why we can finally rest. They drove toward Tucson as the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting everything gold and amber and making the landscape look like somewhere miracles could happen if you believed hard enough and fought long enough and refused to let the darkness win without a fight. Somewhere on a distant ridge, a scope lens caught the dying light for just a moment. Brief glint, there and gone. Probably nothing. Probably just reflection off rock or metal or glass that happened to angle the right way at the right time. But maybe not. Maybe someone was watching. Maybe someone was learning. Maybe the next generation of operators was already out there studying patterns, planning operations, preparing to walk the path that Mara Hale had walked for 16 years, but hopefully with more wisdom and support and understanding that some fights are too important to fight alone. The glint disappeared. The ridge went dark. And in the gathering night, somewhere between justice and vengeance, between system and chaos, between the official world and the margins where desperate people made desperate choices, someone was still standing watch. The work continued. It always would, because evil never stopped trying, and that meant good people couldn't stop fighting, couldn't stop choosing courage over comfort and right over easy and standing in the gap between chaos and the people who deserve protection. Mara Hale and Elena Ruiz had taught them that. 16 years of fighting that evolved from solo vengeance into partnership, into sustainable operations with institutional support. They taught them that one person could make a difference, but two people working together could make that difference last. That networks were stronger than individuals. That the next generation deserved better than the brutal path their predecessors had walked. The desert stretched out forever, beautiful and lethal, and full of stories that would never be written in official reports. Stories about ghosts and guns and partnerships forged in fire. Stories about the quiet courage of people who chose to fight even when nobody was watching and nobody would remember. And the only reward was knowing they'd done the right thing when it mattered most. Cole Masterson drove home thinking about his daughters and the world he wanted them to inherit, thinking about Mara Hale and Daniel Torres and 16 years of sacrifice that had finally achieved justice, thinking about Elena Ruiz and the network they were building together, proving that sustainable change required more than heroic individuals, required teams, required institutions that worked, required people who refused to give up on the system even when the system failed them first. The communicator in his pocket buzzed. Message from Mara. Thank you for everything, for believing, for helping, for showing us that trust is possible even when systems fail. Danny would be proud of what we built. Elena and I both know it. Masterson sent back 3 words. Mission accomplished, together. And in the silence that followed, in the space between words and actions, in the place where good people made hard choices because the alternative was letting evil win by default, something that might have been peace settled over the desert like benediction. Some stories end, some transform, and some continue forever in the hearts of people who understand that justice isn't a destination, but a direction. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. And that the most important victories are the ones that create systems where fewer people have to be heroes because the institutions actually work. The desert ghost had found rest, but the watch continued, now carried by a partnership instead of a solitary warrior, a network instead of an individual, a sustainable model instead of a path to burnout and death. Because that's what guardians do. They stand in the darkness so others can live in the light. They fight the battles that need fighting. And when their methods prove unsustainable, they adapt. They build teams. They create institutions. They pass the torch not to replace themselves, but to multiply their impact. Somewhere on a distant ridge, 2 shadows moved. Not 1, 2, working together, coordinating, proving that the next generation had learned the lesson. That strength came from partnership. That the margins were less lonely when you didn't walk them alone. The desert kept its secrets, but the watch continued, and this time the watchers weren't ghosts anymore. They were partners building something that would outlast them both, forever.